Hello and welcome. This is going to be lecture 4 of the original Trilogy series, and also this is going to be the end of movie 5, The Empire Strikes Back. And well, last lecture was really interesting. It's like, it's more of a mystical idea, but it's a very Jungian idea. It's like you first must confront yourself, you first must understand yourself, and then you could take on the world. This is something that Jordan Peterson says all the time. He says, clean up or set your house in order before you criticize the world. It's like, well, first you must be able to be responsible for yourself, and then maybe you're going to be responsible for society. Maybe. But if the mindset that you have doesn't even work for yourself, if it doesn't even make you, let's say, fulfilled, productive, and enjoying life, then it's like, do you really want to implement that same system on the world? Like, it's a pathological view. It's like, what makes you think that will work? And so that's what Luke does first. He says, okay, first I need to confront my own shadow. First, I need to learn the rules of the game, or at least learn the rules of the Force, which is the rules of myself, from Yoda, and then, maybe then, I could take on the world. I could take on Darth Vader. So this is what he does right here. He confronts his shadow. He confronts the evil within him first. And while this might be seen as a failure, because it definitely is, right? It definitely is a failure in the fact that he was too impulsive and he was not in control of himself. At the same time, he's at least aware of the evil within him, and he's also aware of the potential future in which he can, be. He could be Darth Vader. He could turn into Darth Vader. He could become, part of the dark side. And this is an idea that was explored very deeply in Harry Potter, too. It's like, okay, Harry has a scar. What does that mean? He was touched by evil. What does it also mean? It says that, he knows exactly what he could be. He sees Voldemort and he says, me and Voldemort are very similar, right? We're very similar people, just like Luke and Darth. It's like, we're both incredibly powerful. We both have the same type of wand, We both were orphans, and we both just believe that we're a little bit more than the system in which we've been placed. And God, there's so many similarities in me. And Harry just says, he's like, I could be him, right? It would be very, very easy for me to just, turn to something like the dark side and become Lord Voldemort, become the next Lord Voldemort. And this is an idea that we must struggle with every single day. You take this and apply it to your own life. It's like, think about it, right? Think about the fact that you have two capacities, right? And this is a unique capacity of humans. You have the ability to see evil, right? The evil within yourself, and you also have the ability to see the future. And you put those two together, and you could actually predict the amount of mistakes in which you were going to make. I'll give you a quick example. This was the main problem that I had throughout all of high school. I would be scrolling through something like Instagram, and I would say, okay, 10 more scrolls, or usually 5 more minutes, something like that, and then I'll be done. So I'll scroll. I'd hit 10. And then I'd hit the 10, and I'd be like, all right, I'll go 10 more. It's the same idea that children do, right? Children do the same thing. Their mothers say, hey, their mother calls down and they say, all right, we're leaving now, let's go. And the kid says, 5 more minutes. And then even the child knows that's not 5 more minutes. That's 15 minutes. That's 20 minutes. That's 30 minutes. They're going to try to stretch that out as much as possible. You can imagine a child is impulsive and you're impulsive. So we could say that there's this little childish instinct in you that when you're watching a Netflix show, you say, okay, this is the last show. Because I know that I probably shouldn't be watching this show, but it's okay. I'll watch this one show. We could say that's the representation of evil, or not being in control of your decisions, because at that point Netflix is in control. And then you go throughout the entire episode feeling rather content, saying, okay, this is my last episode, that's okay. And then you reach the end of the episode, and you don't want to leave. You don't want to leave. And it just keeps going, and you'd say, okay, I'll just watch one more episode. 5 more minutes, right? And there you go. You have the endless loop. That's the idea of mindless scrolling. It's like there's no bottom to your Instagram feed because there's nothing that tells you to stop. One of the best things about the world, right, is that there's always things that tell you to stop. You have a cup of water. It's like, how do you know that you're done with the water? Because you're done with the water. How do you know that you're done with your food? Because your plate is empty. But with scrolling, it's something completely different. With these online, well, let's say problems, you could scroll forever, essentially. And well, that's the idea. So it's like, how do you conquer that? How do you understand that? And well, how do you overcome that? And the answer is very simple. You see your evil within you, which is the potential for you to scroll forever. And then you also see the fact that you're probably tricking yourself, right? You look into the future and say, when I say 5 more minutes, I really don't mean 5 more minutes. Be real with yourself. Be honest with yourself and say, well, it's probably going to be more than 5 minutes. I'm probably going to be here for the next 30 minutes. And with your capacity to see, let's say, your potential to scroll forever and also, well, your innate, let's say, desire to keep scrolling, then you could stop lying to yourself and say, this is not actually 5 more minutes. When you put in this little rationalization saying, oh yeah, only 5 more minutes, you could actually tell yourself, no, this is not 5 more minutes. This is going to be an hour. This is going to be 2 hours. And well, that helps a little bit. It's the same idea. It's a really, really interesting idea. My friend told me this the other day, and it makes very much sense. It says, it's easier to spend 0 minutes on Twitter than only 15 minutes on Twitter. That blew my mind. And then I brought up the abstraction. It's easier to have 0 M&Ms than to have only 1 M&M, because once you kind of get started, once that personality kind of manifests itself, in this case it would be something like mindless scrolling or something like your hunger instinct, it's just going to take over, right? And then you have to put in, it's easier to not do the thing at all than to have the control to stop yourself. And that's the same problem that you get to with mindless scrolling. It's like you just can't stop. So the answer seems to be something like, and this is what the people who, well, stay away from, this is what we do every time when we see drugs. We say, oh yeah, I'm not just going to have just a little cocaine. I'm not just going to have a little heroin. It's like, no, I know exactly where that's going to lead me. I know exactly that I am going to lose control after 1 M&M or after 15 minutes of Twitter or after 1, snort of cocaine. And we see into the future and we say, I'm not going to be able to trust myself after that. So, that's my shadow, and I am going to take conscious control over it. The same idea, it's actually a very cool idea that they have in martial arts. It says, confront your shadow, right? Become a monster. Become somebody who can hurt people so you don't have to hurt people. Right? That's the main tenet of martial arts. It should be something that you know. It should be something that you integrate into your personality. But at the same time, you should not be the person who bullies people or goes out to start a fight. The idea is something like in jiu-jitsu, it's like 99% of the time, if you get into one of those like fist fight battles where you're circling around, you could just walk away. Right? You could just walk away, and it would be, they encourage you to walk away. But in that 1% of time where you really need to, well, become a monster and unleash your abilities, well, you have them. And also, another idea with that is, if people know that you have those abilities, they're not going to mess with you, right? If you come off as assertive, if you come off as someone who is, well, not to be messed with, people could usually tell right away if you're able to be a pushover, if you're going to get pushed over. And it's like, they could tell if you're a monster. They could tell if you're an integrated monster. And if you are, then they're not going to mess with you and you could have a good time. But if you're just weak, if you don't accept your shadow, if you're just, well, let's say something like a pushover, then what's going to happen is you're not going to have the ability to stand up for yourself. And if you ask the question, why should Luke become a hero in the first place, the answer is something like that. It's like, well, if you don't become conscious, if you don't become your own person and a strong individual, then you're just going to be pushed over and you're just going to be influenced by every single external force, external pressure that exists. And that's the basis for conformity. So, now, I promised that we would explain this concept, and I think this is a really, well, it's one of the most important concepts in the entire Star Wars universe, right? It is the Force. What is the Force? And what does it really mean? You know, it's a really interesting idea, because it's like you create something like a Jedi universe, right? You create something like a movie, a story, whatever it is. And if you put it in a different galaxy, right? If you put it in a realm that exists outside of our world, what you're really doing is creating a new world, right? That's really what you're doing. And when you create a new world, you create new religions, you create new people, you create new structures, you create a completely different society that our current one has. And obviously there are bounds to that, because, well, humans can only take it to such a level of abstraction. Like, you look at something like an alien, right? A depiction of an alien. Why does it have 2 arms and 2 legs like we have, right? Shouldn't it be just some completely deformed creature? We can't, our human brains don't even have the capacity to understand something like that. So, you know, they just kind of distort its features a little bit, give it a bigger head, a bigger brain, you know, make it a little smaller, but it still resembles a human. The same idea goes with almost all the mythological creatures. It's like, well, what is a unicorn? A unicorn is just a horse with a few extra features. What is a centaur? A centaur is just a horse with a human body. What is a werewolf? It's just a wolf that transitions between human and man, you know? And so what they're doing here is they're kind of creating this new world, a way for humans to kind of extract their, kind of step out of the world in which they live in, because, well, we live in a world that's relatively ignorant, right? And we don't know everything about the world. So if we could extract ourselves out of this world and put ourselves in a new universe, and then maybe we could accept the principles of this universe, this story universe, like the Force, and then apply it back to our world, then maybe we could begin to understand things. And that's exactly what the Force does. So, in a basic sense, right? In a basic sense, this is what the Force is. This was explained in Star Wars 1. It was Qui-Gon to young Anakin, Anakin says, "I've been wondering, what are midi-chlorians?" And Qui-Gon says, "Midi-chlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells. They continually speak to us, telling us the will of the Force." So, what we could get from that is a very, very interesting idea. Okay, so the midi-chlorians, yes, interesting idea. Midi-chlorians are something that reside within you and connect to the Force. Now let's take it the next step. What does Yoda tell Luke in the 5th movie? He says, "My ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us, binds us. Luminous beings we are, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force flow around you, here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, yes, even between the land and the ship." So, what he's really saying is, the Force is something that exists around us, right? It's something that permeates around us and is, well, essentially everything. But it's not matter, right? Because matter, we could say, is everything. There are air molecules that I'm grabbing in the air right now. This desk is made of matter. Saying no, it's more of a spiritual connection that exists in the world. And the goal, right, from the Star Wars sense, in the abstracted sense, it says the goal is to connect your midi-chlorians with the Force, right? And when you have this harmony between your individual, let's say, Force and the Force itself, then you are, well, let's say, at one with nature, at one with nature. And you ask the question, what is this hokey, right? What is this hokey? What is this? Does it even make sense? And one of the things that I thought was really crazy when I heard the Force is, well, it is the foundation for one of the largest religions that ever existed, Hinduism. Hinduism has this exact idea. They believe that we have an individual Atman, which is the midichlorians. It's the resemblance of life that exists within us, and the Brahman is the Force. The Brahman is the general spirit that exists everywhere, and, well, the goal of life is to connect the Atman with the Brahman. It's the exact idea that the Force is explaining, just with different terms. And what does the Hindu religion say, especially in this diagram? It's very simple. You have your individual Atman. You have your individual, let's say, semblance of life, connection with nature, or divine potential within you. And what is the only thing that's blocking you from the Brahman? What is the only thing that's blocking you from, let's say, spirit? And the answer is the body, right? It's the body. It's your crude matter, as Yoda would say. And, well, your animalistic impulses, right? Because you think of something like your body and you say, okay, if you're motivated by lust or hunger or fear or anger, right? Any of these things, then it's as if that is going to take over your self, over your persona, and you can't connect to anything below that. You can't connect to anything that exists outside of the realm. Because you think of something like fear, for example. Fear is a very good example. When you're fearful, let's say, of judgment, right? If you're fearful of judgment and you don't want to open yourself up to somebody because of that, which is why people don't open themselves up to each other, then you are simply losing a potential connection with somebody. You're losing this, whatever relationships are, whatever makes them so special, you're losing that because of your fear. The only thing that's blocking you is this animalistic desire not to put yourself out there. And, well, that's unfortunate, right? That's the thing that blocks the connection between you and let's say the universe. And, we think of this as an abstract idea. And it is an abstract idea. But one of the things that I think is incredibly crazy is that I've seen so many movies that pertain to this exact idea. And here they are. The Matrix. The Matrix, when Neo does the bending of the bullets and bends his back and lets all the bullets go by him. The bending of the spoon, that's also an idea in the Matrix. That's the meaning. He connects his individual self with the Matrix. He connects himself with with the world. He has full control. In the movie Frozen 2, it's the same idea. You have this idea of the 5 spirits. The 4 spirits on the outside represent nature, and the 5th spirit in the middle represents the individual consciousness. And you can imagine that the 4 spirits on the outside represent the body, right? And what is the thing that combines, what is the thing that is in the middle in this case? It is the individual. It is the individual connection that binds all of the 4 natures together. It's absolutely beautiful the way that they did that. And also in the movie Interstellar, I thought they did it so well in Interstellar, where Matthew McConaughey is essentially connecting with Myrrh through his individual self. It's incredible. So, if you ask, what is the Force, fundamentally speaking? It's not even close to a material idea. It's not even close to a rational idea. There is almost no way to explain it logically. But the way that I can explain it is very simple, and this is why it has to be incredibly, abstract. It says, we Christians, or we general Christian society, tend to believe that God is somebody who made the world. It's a person or a being that created the world. Hindus don't believe that. All of these religious ideas don't believe that. What they say is that God and nature are one. God exists all around you, and God, whatever you believe to be God, we're going to call that spirit. It's the same idea, and it exists everywhere. And again, right, between you, me, the tree, the rock, yes, even between the land and the ship. And when you're connecting with, let's say, nature, right? When you take a step out into nature and you take a walk, for example, what you're really doing is you're connecting your individual self with something resembling the spirit of life. And that's really, you know this the most when you're in a relationship, right? Because in a relationship, it seems almost as if it's not the connection between two bodies. It's not the connection between me and you, per se. And I wouldn't even say it's the connection between my brain and your brain. It's not like we're trying to penetrate each other or trying to speak to each other from body to body. If you get into a really deep conversation, it's almost as if you're having a conversation from soul to soul, from God. Maybe we'll go with that. You're having a conversation from soul to soul. And for that moment of time where you're just immersed so deeply in the conversation, you forget that you're there. You forget that you're in this crude matter. You forget that you're in the body. You forget that you're a person and you're just in a connection with the other person. And we could say maybe that's the perfect alignment between your, let's say, midi-chlorians and the Force. It's a beautiful idea. Actually, there's a Christian idea. It was really interesting. My friend told me this. It was when two people have a conversation about God, then God is in the room. And that's the exact idea, right? The exact idea is when two people are having a meaningful conversation and are talking about, let's say, the spirit, then the spirit itself is in the room, right? Then the spirit is, let's say, manufacturing the conversation. It permeates in the conversation, and well, that's the exact idea of the Force. So one of the big criticisms that Joseph Campbell particularly and Carl Jung offered about Christianity is this idea between the separation between God and nature, right? Because we look at something like a tree and we could say that this is something that God made and God gave man dominion over all the animals and the land. But that's not so. That's not so in the Eastern traditions, right? The Eastern traditions, like Hinduism with the Atman and the Brahman, it's something like everything on this earth is divine. Every single thing should be respected and treated as if it is conscious. And therefore, you have a completely different outcome, right? You look at the way that the Native Americans treated the buffalo. It's like they would perform ceremonies for it after they killed it because they said, thank you. They're thanking the buffalo for giving them food. And they acknowledge its spirit. And then when the humans came in and just completely slaughtered all the buffalo and just didn't respect them at all, well, their justification was very simple. God and nature are separate. I have dominion over the animals, and why do I care about these buffalo? These buffalo are, well, not us, not human, and therefore aren't divine. It seems like, for whatever reason, humans are actually, or at least Americans are, sort of returning to our spiritual roots there, for whatever reason, because now there's more of a emphasis on animal rights. And you could say, why should we give a sense of humanity to animal rights? And the answer is because they're part of nature and therefore part of life. But that is the Force. It's a God. It's a spiritual concept. It's a spiritual concept, and I think to some degree we all believe it. It seems like we all believe it because, or at least it's a fundamental presupposition behind our actions, because you wouldn't trust somebody. You wouldn't have this immense amount of trust in anybody if it weren't for your innate feeling, your innate, let's say, spiritual desire that they are a good person, right? And that's an arbitrary judgment, right? We just make that judgment saying, okay, I think this person's a good person. I think they could be trusted. Even though only I know all of the terrible aspects of me, and only you know the terrible aspects of you, and we probably won't share it with each other. You won't even share it with your best friend because you know that there are some things that are seriously wrong with you. And if you told people then you probably shouldn't be trusted. But we just take this sort of leap of faith because we say, well, I guess, because there's no other way of living. The other way of living is something like, don't trust anybody and leave your walls completely up. And that's, well, the worst thing ever. So Luke has to struggle with this idea. And this leads to Rule 3. I explained the first two rules in the last lecture. Rule 3 is you need to believe, right? You need to believe. And I explained this in Batman, in The Dark Knight Rises, but it's really, really awful how arbitrary, how in every single thing that you do, no matter what you do, you have to take a leap of faith. You have to, right? People criticized religion for a leap of faith, right? For taking this sort of, well, you have to just believe in this God. But even in something like rationality, it's like you believe in this system, and then you believe that every single logical explanation for the world is correct, which doesn't seem to be true, because you cannot come up to a logical explanation, let's say, as to why I just have one in my mind, as to why this sort of connection exists, right? The thing that I explained to you in the Force, why some people are able to overcome, let's say, the worst of all tragedies and, well, can persevere. It was crazy. There was this belief for a while that humans can only survive without food for something like, I think it was like 30 days. And that's very logical. It's like, okay, humans, yes, that's fine. Okay, makes sense. There was somebody who didn't eat for 380 days and then just shatters all expectations, shatters everything. And well, the problem is you realize that something like logic, something like reasoning has its flaws too, and you just must take a leap of faith to say that your logical assumptions are correct. This is one of the first things that I learned when I got into psychology classes. The first thing that I learned was out of a very old professor. He was like 70 years old, and he told me, he said, the things that I learned in college were completely different. Many of the things that I learned, the things that we believed to be right, were completely wrong, and now we updated them. So let's say we were ignorant 60 years ago, and then he told me, well, the things that I'm telling you today, the things that I'm telling you in this class, half of them will probably be wrong in 50 years. That's what he told me. He said half. And well, that's the idea. We once believed rationally, logically, that we were at the center of that the Earth was the center of the universe. It's like, okay, you're taking a leap of faith there. There's some assumptions that this world is too damn complicated for, that you just sort of take. And this is what Luke must do. Luke must believe fundamentally that, we'll say, the spirit exists, that this human nature exists. And he says, I don't believe. And Yoda says, that is why you fail. It's a beautiful idea. It's like, you pick a system, you pick whatever, let's say, value system that you want. Pick anything. And let's go with the career example, right? The career example is very simple. It's like, I think I want to be an accountant. I'm going to make that my highest value in terms of careers. It's like, okay, you ask the question, do you really want to be an accountant? Do you really, let's say, believe that that will make you happy? And most people would say no, right? Most people we'll say, high-paying financial jobs will say no, and because there's a reason why they pay you that much, because people don't want to do them. And then you see, especially as a college student, I see the deterioration of students. You have someone like students who don't believe that school is worth anything, and they don't believe that, well, accounting is going to make them happy, or finance is going to make them happy. And since they don't have this fundamental belief, you expect that, well, they're going to do worse in school. It's like A causes B. It's very simple. It's like if you don't have the motivation to do school because you don't like it, then, well, if you don't like school, you're probably not going to have the motivation to do school, and you're probably going to do worse. It's like, well, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. And this is one of the things I see all the time. It says, well, whenever somebody says, I'm giving up my dream to do something like being an accountant, what happens is they work less hard than they would have if they were following their dreams, right? Because you don't believe in accounting as much as you do, let's say, making a lecture series and hoping to have an impact on the world, right? And therefore, it's almost as if you're spending your life not pursuing your potential because you're going to operate at, let's say, 70% output, 70% of your potential. And this is why you fail. This is why you fail, as Yoda would say. You must believe in what you're doing. You must have an alignment between your unconscious and conscious desires, right? Your unconscious should be saying, yes, go. And your conscious should be saying, yes, go. But if you ever say, well, I'm just going to will my way through it. I'm just going to get through the first, I don't know, in finance, they say 5 years of finance, make all the money in the world, and then pursue my dreams. It's like, it's flawed because you're assuming that you're going to be able to work as hard pursuing your dreams while also working as hard as doing something that you don't like. And the answer there is very simple. No, you're not going to. So that's one of the things that a hero does fundamentally. They actually believe in what they were doing. It's actually, well, it gives them some sense of meaning. And this is the meaning of what Yoda's quote when he says, "Do or do not, there is no try." All right, you must fully believe in what you were doing. You ask the question, what is the result of not believing? What is the result in not having a fundamental conviction that what you're doing is, let's say, right, and also your unconscious, your motivational desires for progress, change, and what was the other one? Progress, change, and movement forward. That's the same as progress. We'll go with progress and change. If you don't have that, then, well, what are you left with? You're left with someone like Han Solo, right? You're left with somebody who is full of doubt and is serving some sort of, well, subservient or no, lower level master. Because that's what he is. So, and that's what you see in college, right? In college you say, okay, if I don't want my career, if I don't choose a good career, then I'm not going to make that my highest value because I don't want to live like that. And what am I going to, well, delegate myself towards? What's going to be my highest value? Something like having a good time. And while I do believe that, well, having a good time is important, it definitely shouldn't be your highest value. It's like, definitely not. And, well, for many people it is. So you have, next we move on, and we have Luke. He says he, basically has connection with the Force, finds out that Han and Leia are in trouble, so he says, I'm going to go and help them. And Yoda's not very okay with this. He says, first Obi-Wan says, if you end your training now, if you choose the quick and easy path, as Vader did, you'll become an agent of evil. And it's ambiguous as to whether or not he should have gone. It's like, we don't really know, because it's like he might have been able to stay on his training, but at the same time, it's like, probably should have gone, right? It's very ambiguous. Obviously, Obi-Wan is not very okay with it. Yoda's not okay with it, but Luke is ready to go. And, the thing that you could take from this is, like, you can't just stay in your little bubble forever, right? Let's say you decide to learn something. It's like, actually, Mahali said this. He's like, you could stay on your little straight path and kind of go forward and say, let's say you're learning piano, and, you learn your first set of lessons, and then your second set, and then your third set, and then you feel really good, but then someday some guy's going to walk in and play piano, and he's going to be at a level 15, and he's going to blow you out of the water, and, let's say you're on level 3 at that point. When you go to level 4, you're not really going to want to do your level 4. You're going to want to try level 7, because you want to be where he's at. And the answer is something like, you can't hide yourself from evil. Evil always will, have an effect on you. So he decides to go, and essentially he decides to be tempted by the devil, something like that. He decides to be tempted by Darth Vader. He says, I can handle it. And again, it's very ambiguous as to whether or not he can actually do it, but it seems like that's sort of the answer, right? The answer is that any hero, right, the goal of the hero is to be able to be tempted by the devil, be tempted by the dark side, and confront it and hold strong, right? Confront it and hold strong, and overcome it, right? And defeat it. And, that's actually something I talk about in my book, right? In my book, I give this, I explain very simply. When people decide to quit smoking, for example, right? What they do is they say, I'm going to quit smoking. Here's my cigarette, right? Or my Juul or whatever. And I'm just going to throw it in the trash can and never worry about it again. Usually they flush it. And then they say, okay, this is a great moment. I feel incredible. But what you're doing there is you're really saying, I am going to avoid all possible temptation and leave myself in sort of, let's say, a safe space for the time being, right? So I don't have to confront temptation. But it's naive. The problem with flushing the toilet and assuming that this is the end of all problems is, believing that you're never going to be hit with the temptation again. Maybe you're not going to be hit with the external temptation because your Juul is going down the toilet, but, you're going to be hit with a internal temptation, right? That's exactly what withdrawals are. And I actually offer a different solution because of that, right? So instead of running away, instead of making the naive assumption that all external problems are going to run away, I say keep the Juul there. I say keep the whatever, cigarette box, whatever, and leave it there. And then when you're really struggling, when you're really tempted, right, instead of saying, no, let's kind of throw it away, I don't really want to deal with it, I say take that Juul, whatever it is, a loaded Juul or a cigarette, and put it on the table in front of you and stare at it. Instead of trying to run away from the feeling that you want to smoke, confront it. Look at that thing right there and say, I'm going to beat you. I'm going to beat you. I know what you're doing to me. I could feel it and fully feel those emotions of, yes, I really have that temptation to smoke, and overcome it. And, that's the fundamental representation of confronting the devil within you, confronting the dark side within you, and, well, defeating it instead of just running away from it. Because one of the things that you see for people who flush it down the toilet, it's very simple. It's like you could just drive and get a new one, right? Like, you're really not doing anything. And, well, when you flush it down the toilet, you're saying that I'm going to make an external change, but you make no commitment to an internal change. When you decide to confront your, whatever it is, right? You can do the same thing with food. You can do the same thing with social media. You can do the same thing with all of them. When you decide to confront it, what you're really saying is very simple. I am going to make the internal change, the psychological change that you're not going to defeat me. Even if somebody were to shove a pack of cigarettes right in front of my face, I'm not going to smoke them. And that's the big, well, that's the hard part, but that's the hero part. That's the part that you must do. And what you're really doing in that case is you're controlling your personalities. What you're really saying is, well, anytime in the past that my cigarette personality came up, right? Let's say I saw a cigarette or I felt some sort of internal urge or whatever it is, I automatically smoked, right? It was as if I could switch from having a normal conversation to craving cigarettes right away. But what you're doing when you confront it is you're saying very simply, next time I see a cigarette, my internal personality, I'm learning how to control my personalities so that next time I see a cigarette, I know how to confront it. I know how to handle it. Because the reality is, just like Luke in this case, you can never hide yourself from the outside world. Even if you throw your cigarette in the trash and say, I'm not going to deal with this ever again. It's like, are you that naive? Are you really that naive? Are you never going to see a cigarette ever again? Are you never going to see a jewel? It's like, most likely, well, they're everywhere. So instead of, and this will be the final point on this, it's like, instead of blocking yourself from the outside world, make it so that you're strong enough to confront the outside world when it manifests itself. And that's what Luke decides to do here. So, well, that's as much of a hero as you could possibly think. So now we could figure out, what is this outside world, right? Because Luke already confronted his shadow. He's already done something like that. But the question is, well, what is his shadow, right? And first of all, and second of all, how is he going to confront that in the real world? Sure, he had his internal transformation, but how is he going to act that out? Because we've already established that acting out your values is maybe the hardest part throughout all of this process. So we find that this is a little meteor crashing into the planet of Hoth, and this is, well, Darth Vader is spending his time trying to seek out Luke Skywalker. That's all that he's doing. Evil is trying to tempt him the whole entire time. While Luke is sitting in his little jungle, learning about the ways of the Force and training in his safe space, evil is trying to seek him out. Evil is trying to seek him out. And you can see this all the time. It's like, you say you try to go to the gym. It's like, even while the going is going good, in the first few weeks when you're really motivated and you're running every day and you're getting all this stuff, evil is waiting. It's sitting there just trying to seek you out. That's all it's trying to do. And, well, all the forces are coming to get him. You have this figure of the self, the negative self. You have Palpatine, or what's his name? Darth Sidious, saying he could destroy us, and there's a great disturbance in the Force. He could destroy us, and he's plotting, right? Darth Vader, he's also plotting, saying he will join us or die. I am going to convince him, and well, this is the representation of the wrong value system, right? Very simple. When Luke was in the jungle with Yoda, he had to believe, right? He had to believe in this arbitrary value system. Maybe one tenet of it is that I should be a good person. Another tenet of it is, well, every single lesson that Yoda taught him, right? The structure in which he gave, and something like being a hero. It's like, okay, that's the good lessons, right? That's the good culture. That's the good way that Luke wants to act. But then you have the bad culture is also trying to have its influence on him. The external pressures, the tyrannical culture, and, well, evil, right? The dark side. And you can imagine that this is the thing that we struggle with all the time. This is what I explained very deeply in the idea of in Star Wars 4, but this is the overweight mother who gives their kids candy, right? It's Darth Vader would be the overweight parent who says, okay, I'm subservient to you, let's say, impulses, right? And I will make sure I will give my kid the external pressure so that they will join us, so that he will join us, and he will also serve you as a let's say a false god or the highest value system. Because think about it, Luke has chosen Yoda and the Jedi system as his highest value, the Force, which, if we're going to talk about the difference between them, the difference is that Luke has chosen the Force, which is an internal, immutable spirit value system, to be to be the thing that controls him, right? So he has will over it, and he can sort of control it. Then you have someone like Darth Vader, who has given in the thing that is controlling him. His value system is something like the external pressures, right? The system, because he's completely subservient to this false god, to this well, evil value system, to this dark side. And this is why someone like Lando Calrissian is such an important character in this movie. What he is essentially, he is the person who gives into the external pressures. He is the person who takes the first step towards a deal with the devil. So he makes this deal where he gives up Han, and Darth Vader says, I'm not gonna bother you guys anymore. I'm not going to, take away your profits, essentially. And, well, so what happens is Darth Vader, he essentially keeps stretching out the deal, because once Lando gave himself in to this subservient god, to this false god, this external god that, well, has control over a deal, then he loses control. He gives up his control right away. He loses his internal control and gives it up. And, well, then he has to keep going with it, right? Darth Vader says, perhaps you're being treated unfairly. And Lando goes, I guess I'm not, because there's nothing I could do about it. And there are a few things to this. First of all, right, very simple, right? This is the 5 more minutes idea, right? This is the 5 more minutes idea. Lando was too naive to understand the shadowy side. He was too naive to understand, well, Darth Vader might not follow the deal. So he says, okay, I'm going to make this small deal. I'm going to sacrifice my morals a little bit. And then that's just going to be the end, and we're not going to move down any further path. And, well, the problem was, he was too naive to understand a shadow. He never confronted a shadow, and when he faced evil itself, it took himself over. And, well, that's the 5 more minutes idea. That's also the idea with greed, right? That's also the idea with, I'm not going to say greed again. I'm going to say making money your highest value, because, well, this is what you do with your career, right? I see this with finance people all the time. They say, 5 years, I'm only going to go 5 years doing the 80-hour weeks, doing the miserable job, the thing that I know that I'm going to hate. But by the end of that, I'm going to have enough money so that I could be free and do the things that I want to do and, well, not be miserable in the crappy job in which I am choosing. And, well, what's the problem with that? You could say, good plan, right? 5 years of crap and then you move on. But it's really not 5 years. You're underestimating it. You don't understand the pressure of the system. You don't understand, well, how hard it's going to be to stop. Because let's say it's 5 years down the road and you probably don't have as much money as you'd like. And as you'd like is a very subjective measure. And remember, when you make money your highest value, you're always going to want more of it because it could be unlimited. And then what happens is you say, okay, I'll stay for another year. I'll stay for another 2 years. I'll stay for another 5 years. And then by the end, you're stuck in it for the rest of your career. And well, the problem is something like you made too optimistic of a judgment. You made too optimistic of a judgment because imagine it's 5 years down the road and you imagine you're going to be in the same spot that you are now. You're free. You don't really have too many responsibilities and you could cover your own costs. But imagine that by that time, 5 years later, maybe you have a partner and maybe you start having kids and maybe you got to buy your own place and maybe you got to do all of these things. And, well, you're kind of stuck. So this is what Lando finds himself in. He didn't really understand the potential for things to get out of hand. The potential for once I give up control, once I give up my internal, values, then I'm not a person anymore. Then I'm just manipulated by the outside world. And this is what Yoda says. He says this in the 6th movie, but I wanted to bring this up. He says, once you start down the dark path, forever it will dominate your destiny. And I wish I put that in the prequels, because that was the main idea of the prequels. It's like Anakin, he starts taking these little paths, and he thinks it's not a big deal, that he just kind of keeps moving towards the dark side, gets a little more angry, does a, sort of execute somebody when he shouldn't have executed him, Count Dooku, but it's a little ambiguous. It's like, no. When you sacrifice your morals, when you give in to you give your internal judgment, your internal values to something that's external, you're no longer a person. You're being controlled. And that's what Yoda says. So Lando sells him out. What Darth Vader does is he essentially tortures them to get to Luke. And he puts him in carbonite, right? And the idea there is very simple. It's like Vader, in his need to serve, let's say, some value, which in his case is the value of order, the value of no change and no flux, right? No rebellion. And his value is, I'm going to do whatever I can to get rid of Luke Skywalker. And that's why villains kill. That's why villains are going to do whatever it takes, whatever means necessary. Their highest value is something that will sacrifice life itself, right? And that is why they kill. So he sacrifices Han Solo, and he confronts Luke. So Luke comes back. He says, I have to go and save them. We've already established this. And Darth Vader, this is the confrontation, right? This is the moment. He's going to try to tempt him. And he says this in the beginning, right? He says, the Force is with you, young Skywalker, but you are not a Jedi yet. What he's saying is, you have potential, but you still haven't picked a path. You still haven't picked your structure. You still can be both. And what that really means is you're not a person yet. You're not an adult yet. You have to choose one. So, obviously, Luke is he's not as strong as Darth Vader, and that's why Yoda and Obi-Wan didn't want him to confront him. And Darth Vader says, you're beaten. He was beaten. He gets his arm cut off, loses his hand, and now he's completely vulnerable, right? Now he's completely screwed. And, it's the perfect metaphor, right? The perfect metaphor comes up. I think they did this so beautifully. He says, join me, and I will complete your training. If only you knew the power of the dark side. He tells him, I am your father, right? He says you are born from evil, and evil exists within you. It's within your deepest soul. It's literally part of your, genes, which is true for everybody. And obviously Luke isn't okay with that. He's not very happy about that. And And then he gives him the perfect metaphor, right? The perfect metaphor is very beautiful. There are two options right here. You have an arm that's cut off. You can't fight. All you have to do, path one, right? Option one is take the easy route. Just climb back on that platform and just accept and just walk into your father's arms and accept and embrace your tyrannical culture. It's the easy way, right? It would be so easy just to walk back on that platform and say, yes, I will. Well, there's almost no other option. Like, where else is he going to go? There's a mighty drop beneath him, but path two is essentially that. It's a trust fall, right? What does he do? He does a trust fall into some little opening in the ground over there, and well, he enters the realm of chaos because his father is offering him ultimate order. Darth Vader means father in German, right? And obviously there's a lot of Nazi references, so there you go for that. But Darth Vader is offering him a safe, secure path. He's saying, if you want to go and, well, not have to struggle financially, be a lawyer, be an accountant, be a doctor, right? Be these things because it will give you security and it will give you safety, and I will be the one who nurtures you throughout that process, right? And we're going to say Vader is not only a symbol of father, but he's a symbol of culture, right? And that's what our culture says. If you do something like be a high-paying job that you probably don't want to do, we will treat you well. We will support you. And, well, you might have to lose your individuality in that process. You might have to lose your will, but I'll give you some security, some order. But Luke gives a trust fall, and a trust fall is exactly what? It's chaos, right? He enters the realm of chaos, and it's completely irrational. That's another part of it. It's like, it's correct, right? It's correct. It's like going into, we'll say, a lower paying job or a more unstable job is something like, well, chaos. It's chaos. You don't have that sense of security. You don't have this sense of perfect order, but you keep your individuality, and that's exactly what Luke does. So he keeps his individuality, but where does he end up? Automatically, he ends up in the bottom of the entire city, hanging about to die. Ultimate chaos. Ultimate, well, something like pain and something like suffering. You imagine this moment, right, where Darth Vader says, "Come to me." This is the moment after, it's the moment after 2 weeks when you haven't smoked and you're doing very well, and but then you get that hit of temptation, and your temptation says, "Come to me. I will make you feel safe. I will make you feel secure. All you got to do is smoke this cigarette. All you got to do is smoke this jewel, and I will make you feel better," right? This will be perfect order. It's the order that you've been looking for in this 2 weeks of chaos. And, well, Luke denies it. He does the hero thing, but where do you end up? You end up in even worse chaos. Which is obviously the lead into the 6th movie, right? How to confront that chaos. And well, the chaos, right? So he ends up getting saved by Leia, and he has this moment, right? He has this moment where it parallels to Anakin, right? It parallels to Anakin in the first 3 movies. He starts experiencing this doubt in the Jedi Order. He's like, why is my villain, why is the person who is evil telling me the truth? Why didn't I hear the truth from the good side? And that's exactly what Anakin was struggling with. He's like, why is Palpatine being so much more welcoming and so much more truthful and seemingly so much more moral and true to his word than the Jedis? What is happening? And, well, Luke must confront that. He says, Obi-Wan, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me that Vader was my father? Why didn't you tell me the truth? And, Well, now this is pure chaos, right? He's in absolute chaos because now he's having a conversation with his father. His father saying, come with me, right? Come join me on the dark side. And, well, he has a moment of decision. He has doubt in the system in which he has chosen, has given him a reason to doubt it, which, if you even look at, like, Jesus, the archetypal hero, it's like right before he was executed, he said, God, why hast thou forsaken me, right? He's God himself, and he says, why hast thou forsaken me? You have someone like Luke, who's also doubting his previous structure and saying, wait a second, why the hell does this structure seem better to me right now? And that's what he must confront, and that's what we will confront in the 6th movie. We reach the end, and all we have left at the end of this movie is a sense of hope and, well, a decision to make. So I will see you in the next lecture for movie 6.